Hello, and welcome to Northwestern Ontario Voices Fort Frances. I'm Jack Dawson. We are happy to bring you coverage of the Fort Frances City Council meeting from August 14th. The council session highlighted several key discussions, including safety awareness campaigns, support for local businesses, and addressing housing affordability. Thank you for watching Northwestern Ontario Voices Fort Frances.
That I anticipate that someone may apply, which would result in my having a conflict of interest. Okay, we'll go to item number 4, which is delegations and deputations. And we will have a public meeting. And this public meeting is being held in accordance with the Planning Act regarding the proposed amendments to zoning bylaw 03/14, seeking to rezone the property located at 1527 Sunset Drive from existing residential type 1 to residential type 2. The future proposed developments on this property would be subject to the provisions of the residential type 2 zone. The required notice has been provided publicly, with notice being provided via the Fort Frances Times on June 22nd, 2023. And this meeting is being held for the residents of Fort Frances and Council to receive details as well as voice concerns or support related to the proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw. Decision will not be made by Council on this matter tonight. And with that, I'll turn the floor over to John Burrows, our Chief Building Official. John?
Thank you, Mayor Halikas. As Mayor Halikas has stated, this zoning amendment seeks to rezone the applicant Dave Petznick's property from residential type 1 to residential type 2. The purpose of this rezoning would be to allow for future development of multiple residential units on the property, which is currently restricted to 3 under residential type 1. This rezoning follows the objectives of the provincial policy statement and our official plan to promote a varied supply of different housing opportunities. The applicant also wishes to be granted relief for his 12.19 meter frontage. This relief was previously granted when the property was initially created by consent for severance back in 2018. As this relief was previously granted through consent, the property would currently be considered legally non-conforming, and this amendment would only seek to rezone the property. This amendment would be site-specific and would not change or affect any other provisions for this zone type. Approval of this amendment would not grant the property exemption to further zoning provisions or any other governing acts, and it would be the responsibility of the property owner to ensure compliance with any applicable laws prior to development. I'll now turn the floor back to Mayor Halikas.
Thank you. Would the applicant care to make any comment? Go ahead. Could you please come to the microphone, please?
Property in the west. Resident. One building. First step in doing that. First step there.
John, I don't know if the mic's on.
Anyway, the first step to that is a zoning change. So nothing can happen there at all. Residential. Very straightforward. Like it's a large piece of property in the west end. Frontage is narrow for an entrance. There's actually an entrance already there. When we did the severance and stuff before back in 2018, put a extra wide apron in there to accommodate extra access to that property. And that's a little bit. One of the questions that come up before was about the road allowances down the side. It goes between Bob's place and my place. And that's, as far as I know, it's private property. Someone that owns the property on the river that's there. So I would use that for access. I would just use my own property and my own entrance for access to the building. Does anyone have any questions?
I'll do that, Mr. Pesnik. Thank you very much. Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to open the floor to invite members of the public who wish to speak in support of or in opposition to these amendments. Those wishing to speak must provide their full name, address, and phone number. And those wishing to speak should also state whether they wish to be notified of the decision or not. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak in support of or in opposition to this? Yes, Mr. Lidke. Please come up. Dr. Lidke. Sorry. And I knew that.
The other lot was 50 feet. Now, switching from metric to feet, the lot is now only 40 feet. Something's happened there. Secondly, I at that time I spoke in favor of it because I could picture a house back in the back end of that lot that would have access to Sunset Drive. The road don't allow us going to the river is privately owned by the people that own the property behind that. It's not a town allowance, it's a private road. I guess my main complaint is I don't have any problem with the house. I'm just not too happy about a multi-residential house. It does not fit in the nature of the area. We have mostly big lots and decent sized houses. I think that a multiplex in there would be a minimal problem. So,
Thank you, Dr. Lidke. Are there any comments from council? Councilor Bernetta.
I have a question for Jonathan. I understand the property is not serviced. So are there any concerns about a multi-residential zoning, especially for things like septic?
So, thank you, Councillor Bernetta. At this time, it is just looking to rezone the property. Any sort of development or proposal would have to comply with any sort of applicable law and our zoning provisions. So if the applicant, David Pesnik, would like to do something large, like an apartment or a multiplex, he would have to look into getting it developed for infrastructure before proceeding with any sort of building or development.
Thank you, John. Councilors, any further questions? Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. For John Burrows, is there a maximum number of units in R2?
Thank you, Councillor Kircher. There isn't a maximum per se, but depending on the land use, the zoning provisions would restrict the amount of units that would be applicable to it. Hold it up in front of me. R2 zoning allows for 8 meters per unit. So if, depending on the amount of frontage they have, which can be calculated in different ways depending on the irregular lot shape, we can calculate the amount of units that would be applicable to the property. and that would be the limit when he does come to proposed development.
Councillor Kircher, follow up?
Do you know what that number is?
So rough estimates. We took a look at calculating effective frontage based off of MPAC's definition, where you calculate it based off the average of the front yard as well as the rear yard. At roughly 40 meters, that's giving it about 5 units. So depending on how we would like to calculate it, if we choose to have a setback restriction, or if they set back all the principal dwellings to a property width of 40 meters or over 40 meters, you can calculate it based off of that. So if there's an area where they're at 48 meters, then they would be permitted 6 units. But again, it all depends on where they decide to place their units, how we're planning the development of that area, the serviceability of that area, and really just seeing what they propose before going forward.
Thank you. Councillors, further questions? Seeing none, as indicated earlier, no decision on this will be made this evening. The actual amendments will be considered at a future meeting of council. And thank you to Mr. Petsnick and Dr. Lidke for your comments. There are no presentations. Item number 6 is dealing with correspondence and proclamations. I'll go to council. Are there any of these that councillors would like to speak to? Councillor Bien?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to speak to 6.10, please.
Go ahead.
Yes, I mean, I'm certainly in favor of helping the Lakers out, and I think some sort of block party or tailgate party to kick off their season is a great way to get some interest and support for the team. I'm just concerned that by taking up the whole public library parking lot on that day, would that affect the library's operation? They're open, of course, on Saturdays, I think from 10 to 5, which coincides with what they want it for. So I'm just wondering if the library has to be involved in this. The library board should give their approval as well, not just council. Make sure there's no conflict, that they're not planning a big event themselves. I'm just concerned. I want to make sure that we cover all the bases before we give the go-ahead to the Lakers.
Yeah, I'll go to the CAO in just a moment, but I absolutely would think that this would be run by the library board. Would you like to speak to that, CAO Rob?
Certainly. So if council here is in support of it, we will pass it on to the library board for their review as well.
Go ahead.
Sorry, just because we approve it does not necessarily mean it will go ahead. The library board have their say, and then what happens if there's a conflict?
I think what we'll do is ask administration to bring back a report to the next meeting after having discussed it with the library board. Would that be satisfactory?
I think the next meeting of the library board is Wednesday, the September 20th. And they're looking for Saturday, October 7th, I believe. So it might be a tight window there, but so I think the next board meeting for the library is September 20th. Memory serves correct.
I think that administration could go through the library board chair and she could pull the board on this. Although I'm surprised that the Lakers didn't do their homework and do this first.
I did see in their letter that they said they were working together with the library, but I haven't, as a board member, I did not see anything come through yet to the library board about this. So I just want to make sure that before we approve it or it goes ahead, that we check all our bases, make sure that there's no conflict and everything is good for all the parties involved. Thank you.
Any other councillors want to weigh in? So if it's all right with council, then we'll direct administration to discuss this with the library board in some way and come back with a report to the next meeting. And does that seem reasonable to you, CAO Rob?
Through the chair? Yes, we
Okay, good. So we've got direction on that. Yeah, I've got you in my list. So I'll need a mover and a seconder so that we can get this into the minutes. So mover on this, Councillor Olson, second on this, Councillor Bien. Any further discussion on this? All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Okay. Councillors, would you like to speak or pull any other of these? Councillor Councillor Brunetta.
Thank you for picking me over, John. Okay, item 6.7, please. So you'll note, sorry,
Go ahead.
should I wait? You'll note that this resolution came to us from the NOMA board, and it's regarding the housing issues. And I would like to suggest that we support this motion by sending some correspondence to the individuals copied in this motion. As well, you may have noticed in our emails today, we also received similar support from the community of Chapel. So I definitely think that as one of the largest communities in Rainy River District, that we should be supporting this motion.
Again, Councillor McTaggart, would you like to speak to this?
Thank you, Worship. Yes, I quite support the motion, and I think we should take that action as recommended by Councillor Brunetta. My only comment I have, and possibly Councillor Brunetta could answer it through the chair, is that I see in the circulation that MPP Rickford's not on the list, and being a member of cabinet, I'm thinking that he should be included on there too, and I don't know why he's not. I wonder if you could speak to it.
Councillor Brunetta.
Yeah, I appreciate that you noticed that, and I will let NOMA be made aware of that as well. And I believe ours should absolutely include Minister Rickford.
Okay, again, I think we'll ask for a resolution directing administration to bring a resolution to the next council meeting supporting this. So again, resolution then to direct administration to bring a resolution at the next meeting to support this. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Brunetta, Councillor McTaggart, any further discussion on this? All in, oh, Mandy, sorry, okay. Oh, you're quick to vote, that's good. I like that. I like to keep this moving along. All in favor? That's carried, and that's unanimous. Okay, councillors, further items. Yes, Councillor Olson.
Thank you. 6.8. It's just to recognize and acknowledge the city of Woodstock, specifically the county of Oxford, and they're supporting the resolution for the homelessness crisis and opioids epidemic that we're in right now. So I just wanted to recognize their correspondence to us in support.
Yes. And it's really good to see that. And I think Councillor Olson, you deserve a lot of credit for getting our resolution out there. Any further discussion on this one? Oh, yeah, 2 thumbs up from Councillor Brunetta. Other items, Councillor McTaggart.
Thank you, Worship. In regards to 6.4, and this is an acknowledgement from the Ministry of the Solicitor General that approves the setup for a district police services board when the new Community Safety Policing Act comes into existence sometime in 2024. And this is a fairly significant hurdle that we've crossed, one of many that we're going to have to cross, but it's a fairly significant hurdle that we have crossed in getting approval of the setup for the detachment board moving forward. So more for your information. And there's a bit of history behind this, and I'd be happy to talk to any councillor who may be interested in understanding why the change and what's going on. I'd be happy to give an update on that too. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McTaggart. And I think I would just like to add that on this particular item, Councillor McTaggart has personally put in a lot of work and effort getting the acknowledgement from the Solicitor General that we could go ahead with the model that's tailored particularly for the Rainy River District. So many thanks to you, Councillor McTaggart, for your work on this. And since we're on this item, there's a recommendation there. The recommendation reads, the council received the correspondence from the Solicitor General office with thanks. Mover and seconder on that, please. Councillor Olson, Councillor McTaggart. Any further discussion on that, Councillor McTaggart?
Thank you. I should make it clear that this moves away from being a police services board matter to being an administration matter.
Yes.
And council matter. So just so that's clearly understood.
Yep. And just for your information, administration is already working on this and will be reaching out to contact other municipalities.
Thank you.
Okay. The recommendation's on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the recommendation? All in favor? That's carried. No one is opposed. Councilors, any other items of correspondence? Okay, everyone's had a turn, so I have a few. I'll go to okay, I'll go back to the beginning, 6.1. There's correspondence from the Franco Ontario group about raising the flag at the Fort Frances City Hall. Later this evening, we're going to be voting on a flag bylaw, so we won't have to be bringing these to council. It can be dealt with by administration and the mayor. But I would like to see us do this. I think we have a lot of Francophones in our community, and I think that it's well worthwhile to show support for them and their culture by raising their flag and issuing a proclamation. So again, I'd like to put a motion on the floor directing administration to bring back a recommendation at the next council meeting supporting this, supporting raising the flag and issuing a proclamation. Can I get a mover and seconder on that, please, Councillor Bernetta and Councillor Behan? Any further discussion on that? I see none. All in favor? That's carried and no one is opposed. Brings us to 6.2, again, a similar item. Our childcare workers and early childhood educators are so important to our community. And right now, there's a real shortage of them. We're having difficulty getting them for the DSAB daycares and other daycares. And so I think that it's really worthwhile that this particular council indicate that they appreciate the work that these very valued people do. So again, I would like a motion to direct administration to bring back a recommendation that we issue the proclamation that they indicated and that we show our support for childcare workers and early childhood educators. Can I get a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Kircher, Councillor Mackey. Any discussion on that? All in favor? That's carried. No one is opposed, and I thank you for that. One more in the same vein. In my remarks later this evening, I'll speak about CN a little bit. They've been reaching out. They want to be a good corporate citizen. One of the things that they did indicate to us was how important the railway yards in Fort Frances are due to the busyness of the Rainier Bridge and the number and the volume of train traffic going through our community. The importance of Fort Frances to CN, as indicated by CN officials, is much more important than many larger centers and cities. And consequently, rail safety is really important here. We have a lot of trains going through here. So again, I would like a recommendation to direct administration to bring back a recommendation that we proclaim Rail Safety Week on the dates indicated. Could I get a mover and seconder on that? Councillor McTaggart, Councillor Behan, any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, item 6.5. There's correspondence from the Fort Frances Municipal Nonprofit Housing Corporation on the BDO audit report. I'll just report that at the last board meeting of the Nonprofit Housing Corporation, the audit was delivered and the board was satisfied and accepted and approved the audit. And so the recommendation before this council is that council receive the information from BDO Canada LLP with thanks. A mover and seconder, please. Councillor Bernetta, Councillor Olson. Any discussion on this? All in favor? And that's carried. No one is opposed. Brings us to item 6.6, which is correspondence from the Riverside Foundation. I'll put a recommendation on the floor. The recommendation is that council receive the correspondence from Ms. Cox regarding Riverside Foundation's upcoming annual fall gala and that council refers this request to administration for input and recommendation. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor McTaggart, Councillor Behan. Any discussion on this? I'll just make a comment that in the past, council has supported Riverside through their galas. Often we have purchased a table for councillors to attend if they so choose, but we'll see what the administration recommends to us. So calling the question, all in favor? That's carried. No one is opposed. And then one last one, item 6.9 is one that I put on there. Sioux Lookout is looking for support to lobby the federal government to reinstate the northern allowance for the Sioux Lookout area. I think that we should support them in this. Who knows, there may come a time where that might be something that this council would like to do. So again, I would like a resolution to direct administration to come back with a resolution indicating support for Sioux Lookout on this item. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Mackey, Councillor Bernetta, any discussion? All in favor? That's carried, and I thank you. And that takes us to the end of item number 6. Thank you, councillors. Okay, item 7 is council reports on board and committee activity. I'm just going to dig out my whopping report here. Again, my report is published, so I'm not going to read all of it nor speak to every item, but I do wish to highlight just a few of them, and very, very quickly. I want to mention and give a shout out to the Fort Frances Public Library Technology Center for their teddy bear picnic, which I attended on July 14th. It was absolutely amazing. It was well attended. There was a real buzz there. The Lakers were there volunteering. There was a petting zoo, a bouncy castle, face painting, all sorts of activities. It just was a really great event and typical of the services that our library does for us. On July 17th, Councillor Bernetta and myself met with Dr. Verma, who is the president, I believe the vice chancellor, and the dean, all rolled into one of NOSM. NOSM, of course, has become an independent medical university. It's Canada's only independent medical university. And so they're accepting more MD residents and students into their programs. They're planning an expansion, and through a gradual expansion, they plan on increasing the number of seats available in the MD program. Presently, there is 56 seats, and they're going to almost double that to 108 seats. Dr. Verma gave an amazing talk on NOSM and what they do for us. And she spoke eloquently of an awareness campaign that they're running right now called The Future Will See You Now. And this is a program to help raise funding for their new student endowment fund. Again, I encourage you to read my report, but I just really wanted to give a shout out to NOSM and the work that they do for us and helping us to get positions here. Just briefly mention something near and dear to Councillor McTaggart's heart, the Police Services Board, which I attended with Councillor McTaggart. One thing I do want to mention that we started the meeting in a very poignant way with a moment of silence held in remembrance of Hugh Dennis, who was a former detachment OPP commander here, and also in honor of Clint Barton, who was a longtime member of the Fort Frances Police Department and later transitioned to the OPP. And Councillor McTaggart has already spoken a little bit about the fact that we're undergoing a change here in the Rainy River District. We're going to be setting up police detachment boards. Atikokan will have their own board, and then the rest of Rainy River District will have a board. And this is a made in the district solution to policing, and we hope that it not only continues to maintain the high standards of policing here, but will actually improve them. Also, I want to congratulate the Hallett Brewery on their grand opening. If anybody's had a chance to go down there, It's a really nice place to bring out of town guests. I recently had my daughter and her family in town and we took them down there. They offer some really good food and the beer that they brew is pretty good as well. Some good news about the Fort Frances Power Corporation. Recently, we had the Fort Frances Power Corporation board meeting, and power or electrical distributors are divided into what they called cohorts. There's 5 cohorts in the province of Ontario, and they're placed in cohorts based on their efficiency, their cost efficiency. The Fort Frances Power Corporation has been in cohort 3 for a fairly long period of time, and over the last year have diligently worked hard, and now they have been raised to cohort 2, indicating much improved efficiency. I'll also take this opportunity to remind people, anyone listening in the media, that there is going to be a power outage in the town of Fort Frances on August 20th. From 7 a.m. To 5 p.m. So it could last most of the day. That has nothing to do with the Fort Frances Power Corporation. That's maintenance scheduled by Ontario Hydro, Hydro One. CAO Rob and myself met with Daniel Salvatore, a CN rep. And the purpose of that meeting was we've been discussing with the CN that we think due to the volume of traffic through our community and due to what we consider a very low amount in lieu of taxes that they pay here, that they really need to do more to convince the citizens of Fort Frances that they in fact are good corporate citizens, and they're aware of that. I had a really lengthy conversation with Daniel at Roma, and CEO Rob and myself are going to meet with them again at AMO. But we were successful in convincing them that they should do something concrete for the community. And so they have indicated that they are going to donate $15,000 to our spray park, which is going to be welcomed. And they did that very willingly, and we hope that we'll see more of the same from them. And I think that's enough talking from myself. Councillor Olson has indicated no report. Councillor Burnett has indicated no report. Councillor Behan does have a report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, everyone. The executive of the Rainy River District Municipal Association will hold its next meeting this Wednesday, August 16th at 6 p.m. at the Albertan Municipal Office. The agenda includes choosing 2 guest speakers to attend the next general meeting, which is scheduled for Wednesday, September 20th at 7 p.m., with this tentative location being the Rainy River Recreation Center. The executive also will be setting the date for the annual general meeting, which is scheduled to be held in January, with the tentative location being Atikokan. Also at Wednesday's meeting, the executive will vote to approve the treasurer's report, which indicates a bank balance of $35,204.78 as of July 31st, 2023, which is an increase of $1,786.29 over the bank balance on December 31st, 2022, which is based on revenues of $18,987.49 versus expenditures of $17,201.20. Correspondence received includes a letter of resignation from Caitlin Cottam as the RRDMA rep on the Northwest Ontario Health Unit Board, so the executive will be looking to replace her on that board. Turning to the library, as one of the 2 town reps on the Fort Frances Public Library Board, I next would like to introduce and welcome Richard B. as the new CEO of the Fort Frances Public Library Technology Center, who officially took over the position on October 1st. Raised in southwestern Manitoba, Richard received his undergraduate degree from Brandon University before earning his Master's of Library and Information Studies at the University of Alberta. He previously served as head librarian in North Battleford, Saskatchewan, and Portage la Prairie, Manitoba, before most recently, my paper upside down, serving as the community hub librarian for the Thunder Bay Public Library. He also was the lead author of the Manitoba Library Association's document entitled Public Libraries, Intellectual Freedom and Anti-Censorship Toolkit. Again, I extend my warmest welcome to Richard, to our library and community. I also invite all residents to drop by to say hello, as well as to check out all the programs and services our library has to offer. And on behalf of the board, I also want to extend our sincerest thanks and appreciation to Nadine Cousineau for the excellent job she did as interim CEO for the past several months while the search was on for the new permanent one. And a reminder, our next board meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, September 20th at 4:15 p.m. And finally, as the town rep on the Fort Frances Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, I can report that this year's Quest for the Best, which was held Friday, July 21st, once again in conjunction with the Fort Frances Canadian Bass Championship, saw the biggest take at the door ever for the Chamber. Preliminary estimates indicate a total of $20,555 was raised, which was an increase of $3,365 over last year. Quest also saw an additional attendance of 672 people over 2022. Kudos to the sponsors, the judges, volunteers, the backup band, the faculty, and of course, all the singers for making this year's Quest such a success. And congrats to Fort Frances Times reporter Ken Keller for capturing this year's crown. The Chamber's next big event is its 26th annual Business Awards Gala, to be held on Wednesday, September 27th at La Place Rendezvous. I think dinner's at 6:30. Nominations for the various award categories are now being sought, with forms available on the Chamber's website under the Events tab. The next meeting of the Board of Directors after a 2-month summer hiatus is set for Tuesday, September 19th from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. at La Place Rendezvous. And that concludes my verbal update. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bien. That brings us to item 8, which is the consent agenda. I believe we have 9 items on the consent agenda, so please bear with me while I read them off. Item 8.2 is minutes, and the recommendation is that council approve the regular council meeting minutes of July 10th, 2023, and committee of the whole meeting minutes of July 10th, 2023, and that they be approved as presented. Item 8.3 is board and committee meeting minutes, and the recommendation is that the boards and committee meeting minutes be received as information, and they are Fort Frances Municipal Nonprofit Housing Corporation, March 27th, 2023 minutes. Police Services Board, May 26, 2023 minutes. Operations and Facilities Executive Committee, May 3rd, 2023. Economic Development Executive Committee, March 8th, 2023. Sister Betty Kennedy Center of Board Management, May 10th, 2023. And the Business Improvement Area Board of Management, July 14th, 2023. 8.4 is concerning the Royal Canadian Legion Drug Safety Partnership, and the recommendation reads that council agree to the recommendation of administration to approve report AR 23-0362, being the partnership with the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 29 at a class partners level for 30 students at a cost of $480 plus tax, which will come from the council public relations budget line. Item 8.5. Again, dealing with the Royal Canadian Legion. This one deals with the Royal Canadian Legion Manitoba/Northwest Ontario Command, and it's dealing with the Military Service Recognition Book. And the recommendation is that council approve report AR 23-0368, being the support of the Military Service Recognition Book as a 1/10 page advertisement in the amount of $250, including taxes, to come from the council public relations budget. Item 8.6 deals with scheduling the 2024 budget, and the recommendation is that council approve report AR-23-0369, being the 2024 budget schedule. Coming soon. 8.7 deals with the Municipal Disaster Recovery Assistance Program grant agreement, and the recommendation is that council approve report AR-23-0371 to accept the grant funding agreement for municipal disaster recovery assistance due to the flooding event experienced between April 2022 and June 2022, being an agreement between His Majesty the King in the right of Ontario as represented by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing and the Corporation of the Town of Fort Frances. And further, that a bylaw be passed authorizing the mayor and clerk to execute this agreement on behalf of the corporation and be brought forward later in this meeting. Item 8.8 deals with the Video Surveillance System Access Agreement, and the recommendation is that Council of the Town of Fort Frances agrees with the recommendation of administration from item AR-23-0359 to prepare a bylaw authorizing the mayor and clerk to execute the revised Video Surveillance System Access Agreement with His Majesty the King and in the right of Ontario as represented by the Ministry of the Solicitor General, operating as the Ontario Provincial Police, Rainy River District Northwest Region on behalf of the corporation. Item 8.9 is dealing with the Provincial Offences Act, and it deals with the Inter-Municipal Service Agreement Letter of Understanding. The recommendation is the council receive report AR-23-0372, approving the letter of understanding, and further that a bylaw 44/00 be amended to add this letter of understanding. And finally, item 8.10 deals with the award of an RFP 2023-CS-03, which is the Recreation Master Plan. And the recommendation is that the Council of the Town of Fort Frances receive the information outlined in report AR-23-0366 to agree with the recommendation of administration to award RFP 2023-CS-03 to Burnside, R&J Burnside and Associates Limited for the completion of a recreation master plan at an estimated cost of $79,798.32 exclusive of HST. Councilors, would you like to pull any of those items? Seeing none. Then I have a recommendation that council approve the consent agenda as follows. Agenda items 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, 8.5, 8.6, 8.7, 8.8, 8.9, and 8.10. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Behan, Councillor McTaggart. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. No one is opposed. Brings us to agenda item number 9. There's a resolution that states that council approval of report AR-23-0360 will agree with the recommendation of administration to approve an unbudgeted capital expenditure of $353,400 plus applicable taxes for a total of $359,619.84 for the completion of a microgrid feasibility study funded by FedNor and the Fort Frances Network Services. I'll get this on the floor with a mover and seconder and we can discuss it. So mover and seconder, Councillor Behan, Councillor Mackey. So I think before I ask for questions, I'll go to CAO Rob for an update.
Thank you through the chair. This report's more of just a housekeeping item. We entered into agreement to undertake a microgrid feasibility study. The project wasn't within the 2023 capital budget, and council never approved the unbudgeted capital expenditure for that work. So now we're just cleaning up that piece and getting the necessary paperwork in place for that approval.
Councillor Behan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to CEO Rob. I just want to clarify for myself, Rob, when I first read this, I said, oh no, another unbudgeted capital expense. Then I realized reading it more carefully that $350,000 of it is going to be funded by the FedNor grant. The other $9,000 roughly we've covered by the Fort Frances Network Services. So in a sense, there's no cost to taxpayers in this particular again, he said housekeeping matter. Thank you.
Yeah, so Fort Frances Network Services does have a small pot of money. So we're using most of that pot of money to fund a portion of this project, topped up by obviously the funding we got from FedNor.
So there'll be some portion from the town of Fort Frances towards this. Is that 9,000 covered?
Go ahead.
Yeah, there will be nothing from the town of Fort Frances typical reserves.
Further questions? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Mackey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can direct this to the CAO. I guess my question is the public is going to see, hey, we're spending a whack of money for another feasibility study. But if you went out on the street and asked 100 different people what they knew about this, 99.9 of them are going to say zero. So I guess where I'm going is is there or has there been or will there be something going out to the public that details what this plan and the future benefits are, so that people go, hey, we're spending 350,000 now. We're going to be spending a whack more down the road, but they see the benefits rather than just hearing us say, yeah, we're spending another 300,000 here. Who knows what down the road? Should we not properly inform the public on a more ongoing basis, and poof, here it is, so that they know and they're, I guess, informed and not up in arms because they see us spending money that they aren't aware of what it's for. Just
I'll take a partial stab at this before I go to CAO Rob. You make a really good point, Councillor Mackey. We have spoken to this in the past. I've spoken to it in my reports. Fort Frances Power Corporation has also put out some information on it, but you're quite right. The microgrid is a really important thing that could do wonderful things for our community, and we do want to publicize it. And I see that online we have some members of the media. It might be a really good idea if they were to interview Jorg Rubenstein, the CEO of the Fort Frances Power Corporation, about this, or alternately they could speak to me about it, or they could speak to the CAO. But it would be nice to see the media take an interest in this and get that information out there. We can also post some things on our website, but I really would like to see the media get a hold of this. CAO Rob, do you want to add something?
I'm sure I can. Thanks through the chair. Yeah, at this stage of the game, the feasibility study, it's kind of a wrapping up the data gathering stage of things where we're just, kind of speaking and throwing ideas around and talking about opportunities and, the uniqueness of the area and how that could benefit the program and the project. Microgrid it's a fairly complicated, complex issue, from government regulation to how this rolls out in Ontario. Once this is all said and done, and we actually have some information to provide back to the public, and a final report, we'll be sharing that, of course, with council at the table and the public more broadly.
Thank you, CEO Rob. Further questions or comments? I'll call the question. All in favor? Anyone? No, that's unanimous. Thank you. That brings us to item 10.1, which deals with the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation, and it's the Community Enhancement Program application for the Hallett and the Owandam Restoration Project. And so the recommendation that I'm going to put on the floor is that Council receive the information outlined in Report AR-23-0361 to support the application to the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Rural Enhancement Fund for the revitalization of the Hallett and Owandam, and that Council commits to the revitalization of the Hallett and the Owandam in their new position, and that Council agrees to cover 25% of the project plus any cost overages related to the project. Mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Bernetta, Councillor Kircher. Discussion. Questions? Councillor McTaggart.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm really pleased to see this moving ahead. The Hallett presently sits in an awkward position, and it's going to be good to get this moved into a permanent location. I know that there's a couple in the gallery tonight that have worked tirelessly, particularly on the Owandam, to get it moved into some kind of permanent docking position. The only other thing that I'd like to see added maybe to this too, and there is a Russell Brothers anchor that the museum has obtained that would be nice to have incorporated into this also. But I certainly approve this and excited to see it moving ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? I also would like to echo Councillor McTaggart's comments. It's a long time coming. We have the Hallett sitting there and the Owandam is sitting in the town yard, and they're really historical boats. Identical models, not those two boats, but identical models used to be on the back of the Canadian $1 bill. And as Councillor McTaggart indicated, we have the Fagerdals here who did some tireless work in getting the Owandam brought to Canada and then fundraising to get it in good shape. And so I think that we need to put them both in their final home. Councillor Bernetta.
Just a question, if we're not successful in our grant application, what's the next step?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, we are moving into the step 2. This is a formality piece that is for step 2 of the funding that has already been approved to us. And so unless CAO Rob has more to add to that, this funding is secured. This is just that paperwork process of getting it completed.
Yeah. Further questions or comments? Calling the question, all in favor? That's carried. No one is opposed. Item 10.2 deals with the Fort Frances Museum Strategic Plan and Culture Master Plan, and the recommendation is that Council receive the information outlined in Report AR-23-0363 to support the development of a museum strategic plan in accordance with the provincial community museum standard requirements dependent upon funding approval, and that Council support the development of a culture master plan to be developed alongside the museum strategic plan, again dependent upon funding approval, and that Council supports the development and execution of an RFP to secure funding for these projects. Mover and seconder for that, please, Councillor Behan, Councillor McTaggart. Discussion, Councillor Behan.
Yeah, I like seeing this. I think I'm in favor of seeing us look at a cultural master plan at the same time we're developing the strategic plan that we have to do anyway. I think it's a great idea because obviously we want to find ways to promote the culture of our area and encourage visitors to come here, but also from a tourism development perspective. I mean, anything that we can do from that perspective to help improve, again, visitor attractions and getting people to stay here, I think it's a good idea. So I would be in favor of also pursuing the master plan as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Behan. Further comment? Thumbs up from Councillor McTaggart. I'll call the question then. All in favor? And that's carried. No one opposed. Item 10.3. Deals with the policy review and edits, and the recommendation is that Council receive the information outlined in Report AR-23-0364 to adopt the suggested edits to the facility rental policy as presented. First, a mover and seconder. Councillor Behan, Councillor Bernetta. Did you wish to speak to this?
I can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just highlighting that a couple of steps on this policy update. The first being an overhaul of the template on it, but more so going in and trying to find what is going to work better with our user groups as well as administration in being able to manage the rentals of the facilities. There was also some updates on some old policy pieces that are no longer in effect with regards to some facilities that are no longer rentable, or separating facilities out like East End Hall and the auditorium, which were wrapped into one policy piece in the past and is now separated out into their own respectful facilities. So I'm here to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you. CAO Rob.
One thing to just add to Nathan's comments, there are some other pieces that administration is still looking at. So this is really an amendment to get us into the season while we are working on these other pieces in the background. as you know, we're starting to get ready to put ice in, and so people are going to be looking to start booking some of these facilities. So there will be another amendment coming in the not tremendously distant future to address some of those outstanding pieces as well. So this is not a one and done for the year. This is just to get us started on the season.
So councilors, as you know, there were a number of changes indicated, highlighted in yellow in the report. Do you wish to speak or address to any of those? I knew that you might have one, and and then I was going to look at Councillor Behan. Go ahead, Councillor Bernetta.
Thank you, Your Worship. And maybe this is relevant to your last point there, Travis. I'm just wondering, I really like how many of the facilities have instructions about, you know, if you're renting the facility, before you leave, you have to turn the lights out, clean the floors, all of that sort of thing. It's not that specific for things like the senior center or Sunny Cove Camp. So I don't know if that's something you're working on, or is there a separate rental agreement that specifies all that information? And if there is, maybe we should just, you know, put something in the policy or the procedures saying that, you know, the details are in the rental agreement, something like that.
Thank you, Councillor Bernetta. Further question or comments, Councillor McTaggart?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a thought on, you talk about groups switching times in there in 16B1 and in 39. And I just wonder if it might be advisable that if groups agree to switching times, that your administrative staff have that in writing, because it does not specify that, so that there's no potential conflict down the road that someone said this, but someone else didn't understand it that way. And 16B1 and 39 were the two areas.
Thank you, Councillor McTaggart.
Just one other follow up. In 25, ice must be purchased from the auditor from the town. I'm thinking that's beverage ice as opposed to rental. Okay, thank you.
I had wondered the same thing when I first read it. Any further questions or comments? Okay, calling the question, all in favor? And that's carried, no one is opposed. Okay, that brings us, we're moving right along here to section 11. And under 11, we're going to discuss funding approval for Sunny Cove Camp rehabilitation, and the resolution that I'm putting on the floor reads: the council approval report AR-23-0370 agrees to commit to capital funding in the amount of $215,000 towards Sunny Cove Camp, and that council agrees to commit to cover any project overruns. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Bernetta, Councillor Olson. Discussion. Councillor Bernetta.
Yeah, I'm definitely in favor of this. We did, in our last council meeting, I believe, agree to move forward with looking at repairs. So I guess if for some reason, again, our funding isn't successful, we'll have to come back to the table and look at other options. And I see other options listed here by Mr. Burrows are that maybe the hall has to be removed. And I'm suggesting maybe another option might be to remove the log structure, but replace it with a timber structure, which would be more cost effective. So those are things we'll look at, I would assume, if we don't, if we're not successful in getting the funding. So those were my comments.
Thank you. Councillor Behan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Just based on what Mr. Young had said about the Hallett and the Awandam, because it's now reached stage 2, does that mean that the funding has been secured? It's just the formality of moving ahead, or is it a different situation? Thank you. Oh, Mr. Burrows, sorry.
Thank you. Yes, we're pretty much at the approval stage. We just need to go through this as a formality.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, calling the question, all in favor? That's carried. No one is opposed. Very agreeable bunch tonight. And that brings us to item 12, which is Operation Facilities Division's report. I don't see Craig, so I'm looking at Cody.
Good evening, everyone. As Craig's not in today, he's on vacation. I'll be covering the capital report here. So bear with me as I brief myself as I've been off for the past 5 weeks. So we've got the recycle facilities. So the tender has been issued. There was a site, I guess, meeting amongst various contractors that attended on August 9th. And we are scheduled to open the tenders on August 22nd. And then we'll be determining what the construction schedule looks like upon opening of those tenders, though we will be looking for that construction to be completed in the fall of 2023 with the facility resuming the curbside pickup in the fall as well. Sinclair Street, so construction is ongoing. The contractor is currently working to complete the water main. The next steps will be to pressure test and then disinfect the new water main. Once completed, the new water main will be tied into the distribution system, and the 2 new services will be connected to the hospital. The contractor will then move on to removing the old water main, grouting the old sewer main, completing the removal of the old manhole, and then on to road base. Lily Avenue and miscellaneous storm sewer repairs. So the bulk of the Lily Avenue civil works have been completed and services. The electrical facilities for the signals are still under construction at the proposed current under construction intersection. And then the 2 storm outfall repairs have been completed as well along Front Street. The capital construction for Mowood Avenue, Armit Avenue, and Kings Highway, those projects are essentially complete, aside from any deficiency lists or outstanding works, as well as applicable line painting. Surface coats have been completed in those 3 road segments. The splash pad, so excavation and layout of the splash pad has been completed. Intended placement of concrete is scheduled for this week. Formwork was underway today, as well as placement of the pump house into its final position. Still some concrete work, some grading and compaction to be completed prior to placing the concrete. The Houghton Awandum waterfront park design, the project kicked off July 28th with representatives from the town and Little Blue Stem Landscape Architects. Site visits are scheduled for this week. The senior center expansion exterior structure is near completion, soon to start interior works, including the wiring, insulation, and mechanical. Our airport fuel truck was delivered in July and is successfully in operation at this time, as well as our new loader was recently delivered to site and has been put into operation with the fleet already. Wastewater treatment plant standby generator. The long-awaited automatic transfer switch has been received on site. Electrical installation and commissioning teams are on site this week and working on the commissioning of the generator. And then for our pool and auditorium upgrades, 90% drawings for the structural mechanical designs have been received, and comments are back to JML. The next steps will be to review the drawings and return comments to the engineers in order to get the drawings finalized to 100% and issued out for tender. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evangel. Councillors, any questions on that report? Councillor McTaggart.
Thank you, Worship, and maybe it's better for the CAO to answer this, but in terms of the power outage this weekend on Sunday, the commissioning of the power supply for the wastewater plant, will it be in operation, and are we covered? And I know we're good for water treatment. It's kind of the outflow.
Through the chair, yes, that is the big push this week, is to get that unit connected, commissioned, and operational for the weekend power outage. We have been in numerous discussions with the ministry leading up to this. So, you know, we feel we have the ministry support. I mean, obviously, they definitely want us to have the generator going, but if something happens and we are unable to, we do have their support either way.
Yeah, I'm just going to remind council that we need to stay on topic. That was a little off topic. So there's a resolution that council receive report AR-23-0375 as information. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Bean, Councillor Bernetta. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. No one is opposed. Brings us to bylaws. There are 5 bylaws. I'm going to separate them. So I'll deal with the first 4, and then I will relinquish the chair to the deputy mayor. The reason that I'm splitting them is, as I declared earlier, I'm declaring a conflict on bylaw 61-23 in that I anticipate that someone may apply, which will result in my having a conflict of interest. So I'll read the first 4 bylaws. So the recommendation that the following bylaws be introduced and read and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the corporate seal, and become law forthwith. Bylaw 56-23 being a bylaw of the town of Fort Frances to authorize and update management and non-union salary administration policy. Bylaw 57-23 being a bylaw of the town of Fort Frances to authorize an updated management and non-union benefits policy. Bylaw 58-23 being a bylaw to authorize a franchise agreement between the corporation of the town of Fort Frances and Enbridge Gas Incorporated. Bylaw 59-23 being a bylaw to accept a funding agreement between His Majesty the King in right of Ontario as represented by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing and the corporation of the town of Fort Frances for municipal disaster recovery assistance due to the funding event experienced between April 2022 and June 2022, and bylaw 60-23 being a bylaw to adopt a flag raising and proclamation policy for the corporation of the town of Fort Frances. So on those 5 bylaws, I need a mover and seconder. Councillor Mackey, and Councillor Bien. Any discussion or comments on the first 5 bylaws? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. No one was opposed to that. And with that, I will relinquish the chair to Deputy Mayor Bien.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have the chair. The recommendation reads that the following bylaw be introduced and read and finally passed, signed by the mayor and the, I forgot about that. Yep. Yes. Sorry. So the recommendation is that bylaw 61-23 being a bylaw of the town of Fort Frances to adopt terms of reference for the Chief Administrative Officers Recruitment Committee, CAO Recruitment Committee, be introduced, read, and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the corporate seal, and become law forthwith. Do I need a mover and seconder, please, before we have a discussion? Councillor Bernetta, Councillor McTaggart. Oh, I don't have a pen with me. Whoops. I'm out of practice. Discussion. I believe Councillor McTaggart has indicated an interest in serving on this committee in place of Mayor Halakis, and so he's put his name forth. If anyone else is interested in serving on this committee, or we go ahead with, we're good with going ahead with Councillor McTaggart. Any discussion? Okay, then I think it says here, let me read open here. So, on open up. It says here that now therefore be resolved that the council of the corporation, the town of Fort Frances enacts as follows, that council adopt the terms of reference for the chief administrative officer recruitment committee as per Schedule A attached here to and forming part of this bylaw, and that council appoints Deputy Mayor Bien, Councillor Bernetta, and Councillor McTaggart to serve on the CAO recruitment committee, that the CAO recruitment committee shall cease at the conclusion of a successful recruitment of the new CAO, and that this bylaw shall become into force and take full effect on its date of passing. All in favor? So passed. Thank you. Carried. And I will now relinquish the chair back to Mayor Halakis. We'll get him. Oh, there he is.
Okay, that brings us to item number 15, which is a closed session. Oh, do we have a notice? I learn something from the clerk all the time. Number item 14, there's deals with notice of motions. I didn't think that there were any, but there may be some. I should ask. So if there are any notice of motions, we will deal with them at this time. New procedure. I said there might be some hiccups. I just hiccuped. Seeing none, we'll move to, and thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll move to item 15, which deals with a closed session. And just for the sake of people who are here and people who are viewing at home, I'll put a motion on the floor that we're going to meet in camera, and I'll state what that generally will involve. We will go into closed session, so we will leave the room, discuss what we have to discuss in closed session, and then we will come back here and in open session report on what we did. So there's a motion that council now meet in camera in order to address a matter pertaining to RTR/Point Park litigation. And that's litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. I need a mover and seconder. Councillor Bernetta, Councillor Kircher. Any discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? That's carried. And I will just remind people that Councillor Olson has declared a conflict on this. Okay, so we're out of closed session and we are back in open session. And during our closed session, we discussed litigation or potential litigation and advice that's subject to a solicitor client privilege. Now, something new coming out of our governance review is we now have a confirmatory bylaw. So I'll put this on the table. And the recommendation is that bylaw 62-23 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council of the corporation of the town of Fort Frances. Mover and seconder on that, please. Councillor Bernetta. Councillor Kircher. I'm just going to speak to that briefly.
Thank you, Your Worship. So confirmatory bylaw is something that a lot of municipalities, actually most municipalities in Ontario, you will note as part of their agenda package. And that is because a lot of times there's direction provided to administration or different, maybe receiving correspondence or anything minor in nature typically. That is not approved by resolution, as just said. So if it's not captured within a bylaw, the Municipal Act states that the decision hasn't technically been made by council, right? So every decision of council has to be enacted by bylaw. So this is helpful when there's specific litigation matters or anything that comes about that all of a sudden we need to provide proof that council actually made certain decisions. This is where this bylaw is what we call a catch-all, right? It'll capture everything now. Council does, I know there was some declarations of conflict of interest this evening. Council can rest assured that for members of council that do declare conflict of interest, this bylaw does not include you as part of the decision of that process, right? That's still going to be separated. So this is essentially just to cover any items that should or maybe in the future require a bylaw. This captures it. So it's really few and far between that you would ever require to utilize the confirmatory bylaw, but they are recommended to be used by our solicitors. Thank you.
Okay, good. I need that for the rest. Thank you, Madam Clerk, for that explanation. So, calling the question, all in favor? And that's carried. No one is opposed. And that brings us to recommendation that having reached the hour of 7:21, I'm told, because I don't have a watch, this meeting of the Council of the Town of Fort Frances is now closed. A mover and a seconder. Councillor McTaggart, Councillor Mackey. All in favor? That's carried. And thank you. We have made it through our first inaugural meeting of the council after our governance procedure. Well done.